Hello, I'm Shelby Brown from Everyday Democracy, and I want to welcome you rather, to the 2019 Time to Talk Dignity. This event today is sponsored by the Connecticut Collaborative on Poverty, Criminal Justice, and Race. This is a dynamic group of people and organizations who have come together to really help Connecticut solve a really big problem. If you haven't already stopped by the Connecticut Collaborative table in the hallway, please do. We invite you to come and learn more about who we are. But at this time, we want to thank this year's partners, the Thomas Dodd Center, the Human Rights Center at UConn, Everyday Democracy, and of course, Capital Community College for helping to make this day possible. I will come back to share more with you about our purpose today, but at this time, I'd like to call Dr. Duncan Harris to come and help me welcome you to Capitol's campus.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think this is the hot one here. This is the hot one. Okay. As Shelby mentioned, I'm Dr. G. Duncan Harris. I'm the current CEO of Capital Community College. And on behalf of the 3,102 students that we have at the institution, the 200 plus full and part-time faculty, and 400 plus staff members, I just wanted to welcome everybody here today. When Shelby reached out and was seeking a location to have this event today, I did not hesitate at all right? And so when you see the middle name of our college, it's about the community. And despite us being in this location, we recognize that for quite some time, the perception has been that it's been closed, or that it's, for some individuals, it's still a world away, even though it may only be a few blocks. And so we've had a very concerted and conscious effort to open up our college to the community in very different ways. We fashion ourselves a social justice and equity institution. And so forums like this is exactly what we should be doing. And as we seek to partner with individuals and lock arms to uplift our community. We view this space as a watering hole. A couple weeks ago, we had a discussion on mental and behavioral health impacting the Hartford community. We've had forums on leadership in the community, et cetera. And so folks that are here today, we would like to see you back. Perhaps it's to take classes, perhaps it's to recommend that others engage in academic work here, et cetera. And so this is just the beginning of a partnership, longstanding partnership with members of our community. Last thing that I'll say is that we recently completed our strategic plan. And one of the items in our strategic plan was to engage in support for reentry services within to support our students. We didn't know exactly how we were going to engage in that work. And so certainly this is a major, and I can't think of no better way for us to accomplish our mutual goals and to engage and serve as the site for this meaningful work that will occur over the next couple hours. And so I just wanted to welcome everybody to Capital Community College, and I hope to see you back soon.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thank you. It is really a privilege to be here at Capital Community College, this great institution of learning and transition. A couple of weeks ago, I came by and they had a sign in the elevator that said, "Changing lives," and that is really true. What's happening on this campus is lives are being changed, and we want to help focus on what that means. The purpose of us coming together today is for us to have a conversation, but a conversation with a purpose. It's not just talk for the sake of talk, but it is really intentional and purposeful talk. We're also here to make connections. Every single person in this room is someone that you need to know, someone you need to connect with, and someone you need to collaborate with. We're also here to take action, to get connected to the work that's being done in every single corner of the city and of this region and of this state. And so, conversation with a purpose, connections, and action are the reasons that we're here. And for us, we call that everyday democracy. It's about how you take a part in helping to shape the community that you live in and the place where you are going to leave your legacy. So today we'll hear from a number of really wonderful speakers, but that's just to set us up, to get us thinking about the things that will help us have dynamic discussion in the circle. So the very first speaker that I'd like to call, we have, two representatives from the Equal Justice Initiative, and I think I'm supposed to do something here, hold on. Hold on. That. We have Ben Schaefer, whose wonderful picture is not here. We also have Jackie Jones-Peace. And I think that of the two, we're going to hear from Jackie today. So at this point, I'd like to call Jackie forward and invite her to come and address the crowd.
I'm gonna have a little talk with Ben about why my picture is here and his, and his is not. First, I'd like to thank the collaborative for having us here, for the wonderful conversation that we had this morning. We were asked to kind of come and share, and I must say that I feel like I did not do our part. We didn't do our part. We learned so much just in the brief time that we had with you all about your work and the work that you're doing in the state, and we're truly grateful for that and appreciative of you having us here. A brief introduction. I am a senior attorney at the Equal Justice Initiative. The Equal Justice Initiative is a private nonprofit corporation. We are deeply committed to ending mass incarceration, excessive punishment, and racial inequality and economic inequality in this country. For over 30 years, we have represented condemned men and women on death row, primarily in Alabama. We have, oh, sorry. Better? Sorry. We have represented children sentenced to die in prison. We successfully ended the practice of sentencing juveniles to mandatory life without parole sentences and sentencing juveniles in non-homicide cases to life without parole at all. Over the past several years, our work in the criminal justice space has led us to the belief that in order to achieve real and necessary reform, we need to talk more about race in this country. And it's that conversation that we have about race and that we're having about race is tied to this concept of dignity. Ben and I were talking yesterday about what we would do to kind of introduce concepts of dignity in our work. And we thought about the fact that it's so deeply ingrained in EJI's approach to working with our clients that we don't talk much explicitly about treating people with dignity because it is, of course, a given. It's a given when you have a client-centered approach to your work. It's a given when you believe that people are more than the worst thing that they've ever done. And it's a given when you commit to being proximate to those that you're working with and that you're trying to help. And so those are the ways in which dignity is ingrained in our work. We do, however, talk a lot about indignities suffered by the people that we work with in the criminal justice space and in this country in general. And one of the things that we've been talking about more and more is this presumption of dangerousness and guilt that burdens Black and brown people in this country. And we're talking more about it and its roots, right? Because the ability to treat Black and brown people in the undignified ways that we are treated in this country is rooted in our history of racial injustice. It's rooted in notions of slavery, right? And that Black people weren't even people, they were property. It's rooted in enforcing a racial hierarchy through decades of racial terror lynching. Racial terror lynching that was designed to treat not just individuals in an undignified manner, but also to send a message to communities of Black and brown people, right, that they were inferior and that they would know their place, stay in their place, or suffer harsh consequences for not staying in that place. And this presumption of dangerousness and guilt carries through today. It carries through in policies of mass incarceration, in terms of over-policing, in terms of the way that incarcerated men and women are treated in prison. And again, our hope is that we will continue to talk about race in ways that might be uncomfortable, but in ways that will allow reconciliation. At EJI, we have a saying, we believe fully in truth and reconciliation. But they're sequential, and there can be no reconciliation without truth. Thank you.
Thank you. For many of us, the idea of race and racial equity is deeply rooted in the work that we do. But we know, in Connecticut particularly, there's so much work to be done. This state really is a state divided, and there are so many people who go through their days, their lives, their weeks, unaware of the impact that racism has, and sometimes the decisions and actions that they make have on people who are Black and brown. So learning more about race and the racialized history of our country and even of our state is important. In fact, critical to our ability to really uproot and change some of these systems that we are struggling with. When we think about what happens at the legislature and whether or not we can get a bill passed, a lot of it has to do with how well we've convinced our neighbors that race really is a factor. It's really important that they know that we got here through a history that is deeply impacted by inequity. So we are focused on poverty, we're focused on justice reform, and we're focused on race. So thank you very much, Jackie. That was a great setup for our discussion today. And at this time, we're gonna have one of our colleagues who has done an enormous amount of work in the area of policy come up. Andrew Clark from the Institute for Municipal and Regional Policy at Central is going to come and help us set the context for Connecticut and what we know about our state.
Thank you, Shelby. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So, how many here are fans of Bryan Stevenson? Right? How about the Equal Justice Initiative? All right. Okay, so all of us at the Collaborative are as well, and our secret agenda is to have a long-standing connection with EJI. And just so you know, when Glenn Matoma from the Dodd Center offered us this opportunity, we all jumped at it, and Shelby and everybody at Everyday Democracy and all the groups that are involved have been so excited about this conversation, about continuing the partnership past this day, possibly, and with the idea that this conversation that's going to happen today is going to be integral to that. So you are part of us trying to make that connection so that truth and reconciliation that was talked about earlier by Jackie happens just as much here in Connecticut. I was brought on to talk about dignity in Connecticut in the criminal justice system. And it's very difficult for me to talk about dignity in the sense of criminal justice because it becomes very philosophical, and I got to figure out how to whittle it down to particular goals and objectives. So I'm just going to try to, as Shelby mentioned, set up the conversation with a little bit of snippets of some ideas from the perspective that I have as someone who sees this world through the lens of policy. I worked at the legislature. through the lens of evidence from being at the university, to implementation of working with state agencies from community perspective, dealing with individuals and communities who have been impacted by this, from someone who grew up in Farmington and now has lived in Hartford for the past 25 years. And so this is my perspective on it. I don't feel like I have a corner on the market, but I want to give you perhaps something to think about. So when I think about dignity in the justice system, to me, it can't happen just in the justice system, right? I mean, how we treat people around us manifests in the justice system, but it's everywhere. It's how we treat this world. It's how we treat our fellow neighbors. It's how we treat people that don't live in the same country as us. And I don't know about you, but I think we struggle with that. I think as humans, we've struggled with that in our existence. We don't think about necessarily as Americans who's on the other end of that drone attack, who's on the other end of some international thing that doesn't necessarily impact us on a day-to-day basis. And if we're not thinking about that, then how are we going to put a standard of dignity on the people that we view as the lowest, traditionally have viewed as the lowest within our society? And so it's daunting, right? But I think we're in a path, a positive path forward on how we can do that. So if we focus on the justice system, the other thing is, and as we know in Connecticut, and as talked about earlier, we're not there yet. We certainly are not there yet. We're certainly not there in Montgomery, Alabama, or anywhere else in the country, but there are places that we can look to that have established dignity as a framework that you can argue are doing a better job than we're doing. So when I think of dignity, I think of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, right? And in terms of the justice system, yeah, you want to be held accountable for things when you hurt somebody. But where does that accountability end in terms of punishing yourself versus becoming a better person so you don't hurt the next person? Or that you reconcile with the person that you hurt, and you have that opportunity to do so, to help them move past the hurt. And I think about that in terms of the justice system and this classification of us versus them. Because if we look at someone who does harm as us, because we all have the potential to do harm, we look at that through the lens of empathy, of understanding, of dignity. If we look at that through the lens of them, it's dehumanization, it's punishment, and it's perpetual. And so having dignity as a frame means about thinking about someone behind bars or in the justice system as us. But for the grace of God, there goes I. And I could tell you, as someone from Farmington who was on the wrong side of the law, a lot of times in my youth, I could have been involved in the adult justice system, but I wasn't. I wasn't. And so this concept of race and how that matters is really important. And class and privilege when we have this discussion in Connecticut. So just briefly, 5 minutes left, what's Connecticut's history with it? You know our first prison, Old Newgate Prison? You know who us versus them was then? It was the Loyalists in the Revolution. It was the British soldiers in the Revolution. And you know what we did with them in Connecticut? We put them in a copper mine. We subjugated them to what they defined as hell. And we made that okay with ourselves because they were the other. And so we have a history of doing that in our state. I am very interested in exploring this concept, and I talked with Glenn from the Dodd Center through the lens of Connecticut and narrative and how we educate ourselves on our history. And we'll not go into detail now, and it's not fully fleshed out, but I think it's something that we need to discuss. What is that history, and how did it lead to where we are now? I will say we had, just like every other state in the nation, mass incarceration. It's hard to argue that it wasn't a direct result of the civil rights era. I mean, last year, for those who were there last year, and if you hadn't, I would highly recommend watching the clip on EJI, From Slavery to Mass Incarceration. It's only about 5 minutes, and it does a tremendous job of showing that progression to where we got in the early 2000s, where from 1930 to 1980, we had about 3,000 people in our state in prison. The population didn't really go up from 1980 to 2000, but our prison population jumped to 20,000. We were spending inordinate amount of resources punishing people and putting them away. We built supermaxes to punish and punish and punish. And what were we getting for it? Not a lot, not public safety. We've actually closed 5 prisons in the past several years, and we're a safer state than we were then. So what is behind that? What is behind that drive? And what I would suggest is what we need to take a look at, and what might be a consideration for today, is not just narrative and education, which is extremely important, but systems. What systems are in place here that may not be in place in other areas that allow for these changes to occur, that dynamic to shift so that dignity becomes paramount. And one thing that's happened over the past several years is states have gone overseas. They looked at places like Germany that hit and looked at what they did in the Holocaust head on, where it wasn't just a boot to the throat, a punishment, it was extermination. And what that resulted in them, in their truth telling, was that we don't ever want to be like that again. Now it's messy. There's fits and starts of that, and you can see that happening nowadays too. But what did result in that, in the people that cared, they took the time to change their constitution. They enacted the Prison Reform Act in 1976, which regulates the execution of sentences. And it talks about social responsibility. It talks about the value of rehabilitation. And primarily what it does is it puts punishment in its place. It says that it is the taking away of liberty. And that's it. That is it. In Connecticut and across the US, we have a muddled understanding of where punishment lies in our spectrum. So therefore, it's everywhere. And until we figure out where that stands, if we're gonna hold someone accountable, what does that mean? If we wanna punish, what does that mean? And enact that in laws, put that in policies, then we will have a very difficult time getting people to understand how to follow the rules that we're setting out and what are our priorities. And they make it pretty clear. I'm happy to share a lot of that stuff. My time is done, but hopefully that gives you something to think about. And I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you.